The emergency sirens wailed through the 42nd floor of Meridian Financial, their piercing shriek cutting through the usual hum of servers and keyboards. Red emergency lights bathed the data center in an ominous glow as employees scrambled toward emergency exits, clutching laptops and personal belongings. But in the secure server room, three figures remained hunched over glowing monitors, their faces illuminated by streams of code cascading down their screens. "Marcus, we're seeing massive packet loss on servers 12 through 18, called out Diana Chen, her fingers flying across the keyboard with practiced precision. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the air conditioning that kept the server room at a constant 68 degrees. "The intrusion detection system is going haywire." Marcus Thompson didn't look up from his terminal, his dark eyes reflecting the orange warning messages flooding his screen. "I see it. Someone's trying to penetrate our financial transaction database. This isn't random. It's targeted." His voice carried the weight of 10 years in cybersecurity, each word measured and deliberate. Beside them, Raj Patel pulled up network traffic logs, his brow furrowed in concentration. The attack vectors are sophisticated: multiple entry points, rotating IP addresses, encrypted payload delivery. This is professional grade. Outside the server room's reinforced glass walls, chaos reigned. Employees poured from elevators and stairwells as the building's security protocol demanded immediate evacuation. The emergency alert system had triggered automatically when suspicious network activity was detected. But the three IT professionals knew their duty extended beyond personal safety. Meridian Financial processed over $2 billion in transactions daily. A successful breach could devastate not just the company, but the thousands of clients who trusted them with their life savings. Just 3 weeks earlier, life at Meridian had been remarkably different. The company had just completed a major system upgrade, installing state-of-the-art security protocols designed by Marcus's team. Diana, fresh from MIT with dual degrees in computer science and cybersecurity, had been hired specifically to implement the new quantum-encrypted database architecture. Raj, a veteran of Silicon Valley's most prestigious firms, had joined as senior network analyst after growing tired of startup culture's instability. They worked on the 39th floor, in a modern open-plan office, where natural light streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating rows of ergonomic desks equipped with the latest technology. The walls were adorned with motivational posters and company achievement awards, creating an atmosphere of professional success and forward momentum. But not everyone welcomed the new team's arrival. Karen Hendricks had worked at Meridian for 12 years, climbing from an entry-level position in customer service to senior IT coordinator. She had watched the company evolve, survived 3 major reorganizations, and considered herself indispensable. Her corner cubicle was decorated with certificates of completion from various training programs, family photos, and a small collection of corporate gifts accumulated over the years. When the new IT security team was announced, Karen felt a familiar tightening in her chest, the same sensation she'd experienced during previous company changes. She had applied for Diana's position, but was passed over in favor of the younger candidate. The rejection letter, couched in corporate speak about seeking candidates with specialized academic credentials, felt like a personal affront to her years of dedication. "They don't understand how things really work around here," Karen confided to her longtime colleague Janet during their usual coffee break in the break room. "These new hires with their fancy degrees think they can just waltz in and change everything overnight." Janet stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "Maybe they'll bring some fresh perspectives. The old system was getting pretty outdated." "Outdated? I built that system from the ground up. I know every line of code, every security protocol. And now they're treating me like I'm some obsolete piece of hardware they can't wait to replace." Karen's voice carried a bitter edge that made Janet uncomfortable. Over the following weeks, Karen watched the new team implement their changes. She observed their collaborative work style, their casual confidence, and the way senior management praised their innovative approaches. The resentment that had been simmering began to boil over into something more dangerous, a desire not just to prove her worth, but to expose what she convinced herself were the newcomers' inadequacies. The opportunity came on a Tuesday morning in November. Karen had been monitoring the new security protocols, looking for flaws she could report to management. She discovered that the system generated detailed logs of all access attempts, successful and failed. More importantly, she realized that with her administrative credentials, she could modify certain system parameters without triggering immediate alerts. That evening, after most employees had left for the day, Karen remained at her desk. The office was quiet, except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant sounds of traffic far below. She pulled up the system administration panel and began crafting her plan. Using a series of fake login attempts and modified system responses, she created the appearance of a coordinated cyber attack. She rerouted normal traffic through suspicious-looking pathways, triggered false positive alerts in the intrusion detection system, and carefully planted evidence that would suggest the new security measures had catastrophic vulnerabilities. But Karen's technical knowledge, while substantial, was not quite as comprehensive as she believed. She failed to account for the sophisticated logging systems that Marcus had implemented, systems that recorded not just what happened, but who had the administrative privileges to make it happen. The next morning at 9:47 a.m., Karen placed her call to 911. Emergency services. What's your emergency? This is Karen Hendricks at Meridian Financial. We're under cyber attack right now. Hackers are trying to steal client financial data, and our systems are completely compromised. The new IT team, they've left us completely vulnerable. We need immediate help. Her voice carried perfectly calibrated panic, the result of hours of mental rehearsal. Ma'am, have you contacted your company's internal security first? They're not responding properly. I think they might be in on it. Please, send someone immediately. This is a matter of national financial security. Within minutes, the building's emergency protocols activated. Sirens wailed, lights flashed, and evacuation procedures began. But Karen had also made additional calls to the FBI's cybercrime division, to local news stations, and to several financial regulatory agencies. Each call painted the same picture: Meridian Financial was under siege. Client data was at risk, and the recently hired IT team was either incompetent or complicit. By the time Marcus, Diana, and Raj understood what was happening, the damage was already spreading beyond the building's walls. News vans arrived within hours, their satellite dishes and cameras capturing footage of the evacuated building, while reporters speculated about the scope of the breach. This is Amanda Cross reporting live from downtown, where Meridian Financial has been evacuated following reports of a major cyber attack. Sources indicate that hackers may have accessed sensitive client financial information, potentially affecting millions of accounts. Inside the server room, the three IT professionals worked frantically to understand the scope of the attack. But what they found was more puzzling than alarming. The attack patterns were sophisticated, but ultimately ineffective. The intrusion attempts were being blocked by their security measures, yet the system was behaving as if it were under genuine threat. "Something's wrong here," Diana muttered, pulling up access logs. "These attack signatures don't match any known threat patterns. And look at this, the timing is too convenient. Why would attackers trigger our emergency protocols if they were trying to maintain stealthy access?" Marcus leaned over her shoulder, studying the data. "Run a complete system integrity check. I want to see every administrative action taken in the last 48 hours. As the hours passed, the story took on a life of its own. Financial news networks picked up the story, analyzing potential market impacts. Cybersecurity experts were interviewed about the growing threat to financial institutions. Client service representatives fielded thousands of panicked calls from account holders, demanding to know if their money was safe. By evening, Meridian's stock price had dropped 12%. The company's crisis management team worked around the clock to contain the damage. But they were fighting against a narrative that had already taken root in the public consciousness. The trusted financial institution was portrayed as vulnerable, its security compromised by hasty upgrades and inadequate oversight. Karen watched the unfolding drama from her apartment, a modest one-bedroom unit in a suburban complex. She had gone home during the evacuation, claiming to feel unwell, but she monitored every development through news websites and social media. The response was even more dramatic than she had anticipated. Part of her felt guilty about the market impact and client anxiety, but a larger part felt vindicated. She had proven that the company's new direction was flawed, that her concerns had been justified. Her phone rang continuously with calls from reporters, regulatory agencies, and investigators. She presented herself as a concerned whistleblower, someone who had tried to warn management about security vulnerabilities, but had been ignored in favor of flashy new hires with impressive credentials, but insufficient real-world experience. "I tried to tell them that their new systems weren't properly tested," she told a reporter from the Financial Tribune. "But they were so eager to show off their latest technology that they ignored basic security fundamentals. Now look what's happened." The investigation expanded rapidly. Federal agents arrived to examine the compromised systems, while internal audit teams began reviewing personnel files and access logs. The three members of the IT security team found themselves under intense scrutiny, their every action questioned and analyzed. Diana felt the weight of suspicion most acutely. As the youngest team member and the one responsible for the database architecture, she became a focal point for criticism. "I designed those systems to be impenetrable," she insisted to investigators. "Every protocol was tested and validated. This attack shouldn't have been possible." But the evidence seemed to contradict her confidence. System logs showed repeated attempts to access sensitive data, failed authentication sequences, and anomalous network traffic. The attack appeared to exploit exactly the kind of vulnerabilities that Karen had warned about: insufficient testing, rushed implementation, and inadequate understanding of legacy system integration. Marcus faced his own challenges as the team leader. His 10 years of experience in cybersecurity suddenly seemed insufficient in the face of such a sophisticated attack. "I've seen every kind of intrusion attempt imaginable," he told the FBI investigators. "But this one is different. The patterns don't make sense. It's like someone had inside knowledge of our systems, but was deliberately trying to trigger our detection protocols." That observation proved to be more prescient than he realized at the time. Raj, with his background in network analysis, began to notice inconsistencies in the attack timeline. The intrusion attempts started at 9:52 a.m. He reported to the investigation team. "But our logs show that someone with administrative privileges was making system modifications as early as 7:30 a.m. That's not how external attacks work." As the weekend approached, public pressure mounted for accountability. Financial regulators demanded detailed reports about the company's security practices. Client advocacy groups called for executive resignations. Media coverage expanded to include broader questions about cybersecurity in the financial sector. Karen found herself invited to appear on financial news programs as an expert witness to the company's security failures. She carefully crafted her public statements to reinforce the narrative she had created, while positioning herself as a long-suffering employee who had tried to prevent the disaster. "The warning signs were there for weeks," she told a primetime interviewer. Management was so focused on implementing flashy new technology that they ignored basic security principles. When you rush major system changes without proper oversight, this is what happens. But while Karen was building her public profile as a whistleblower, the forensic investigation was uncovering a different story. The sophisticated logging systems that Marcus had implemented were designed to be tamper-proof, recording not just what happened, but who had the authority to make it happen. Diana was the first to spot the anomaly. Working late on Friday evening in the secure server room, she noticed that certain system modifications had been made using administrative credentials that didn't match the external attack patterns. "Marcus, you need to see this. Someone used internal admin privileges to modify our intrusion detection parameters, but it wasn't any of us." Marcus examined the logs carefully. These modifications were made to make normal traffic appear suspicious. Someone was deliberately trying to trigger false positive alerts. Raj joined them, bringing additional data from his network analysis. "I've been tracking the timeline. The admin modifications preceded the supposed attack by several hours. This wasn't an external intrusion. It was sabotage from inside." The three team members looked at each other as the implications became clear. Someone within the company had orchestrated the entire crisis, carefully designing it to appear as if their security systems had failed catastrophically. "We need to document everything before we report this," Marcus said. "If we're right, someone went to enormous lengths to frame us for a security failure that never actually happened." They worked through the weekend, carefully reconstructing the sequence of events. The evidence painted a clear picture. The apparent cyber attack was actually a sophisticated false flag operation, designed to discredit the new security team and their systems. The administrative account used for the sabotage belonged to Karen Hendricks. On Monday morning, they presented their findings to the FBI investigation team. Agent Sarah Mitchell, who had been leading the cybercrime investigation, studied their analysis with growing amazement. "You're telling me that this entire crisis was fabricated, that there was no actual security breach?" "That's correct," Diana replied. "Someone used their administrative access to create the appearance of an attack while simultaneously calling in false reports to trigger our emergency protocols. Client data was never actually at risk." Agent Mitchell reviewed the evidence logs, comparing timestamps and access patterns. This level of deception suggests significant premeditation. Someone spent considerable time planning this operation. The investigation quickly refocused on Karen Hendricks. When agents arrived at her apartment Tuesday morning with a search warrant, they found extensive documentation of her planning process. Her computer contained detailed notes about the IT team's vulnerabilities, draft scripts for her 911 calls, and research into regulatory agencies and media contacts. Most damning was a journal entry dated 3 weeks before the incident. "They think they're so smart with their fancy degrees and their quantum encryption. But I know this company better than any of them. Time to show management what happens when you ignore experience in favor of academic credentials." Karen's arrest made national news, but the story took time to fully penetrate public consciousness. The initial narrative of a massive security breach had been so compelling that many people struggled to accept that it had been entirely fabricated. Financial news networks found themselves in the awkward position of retracting weeks of coverage about cybersecurity vulnerabilities and regulatory failures. Meridian's stock price began to recover, but slowly, as investors remained skittish about the company's reputation. The three IT professionals who had been under suspicion suddenly found themselves at the center of a different kind of media attention. They were no longer failed security experts who had left the company vulnerable. They were the victims of an elaborate sabotage plot who had ultimately solved their own case. It's ironic, Diana told a reporter from TechCrunch. The same sophisticated logging systems that Karen tried to manipulate ended up providing the evidence that exposed her deception. Good security design is about planning for threats from all directions, including from inside. But the personal cost of the ordeal was significant. All three team members had endured weeks of professional scrutiny and public suspicion. Their reputations had been questioned, their expertise challenged, and their personal lives disrupted by the constant media attention. Marcus reflected on the experience during an interview with Cybersecurity Today. The most sophisticated attacks often come from people who understand your systems intimately. Karen knew exactly which buttons to push to create maximum disruption, while making it appear that our security measures had failed. The legal proceedings began in earnest as prosecutors built their case against Karen. She was charged with multiple federal crimes, including filing false police reports, corporate sabotage, market manipulation, and fraud. The charges carried potential sentences totaling over 20 years in federal prison. Karen's defense attorney attempted to portray her as a whistleblower who had been trying to expose genuine security vulnerabilities through unconventional means. But the evidence of premeditation was overwhelming, and her own documentation of the planning process made it impossible to claim her actions were spontaneous or well-intentioned. During the trial, which lasted 3 weeks and was covered extensively by financial and technology media, the full scope of Karen's deception was revealed. Prosecutors presented evidence showing that she had spent months preparing for the false flag operation, researching regulatory agencies, practicing her 911 calls, and carefully timing her sabotage to cause maximum disruption. The testimony of Marcus, Diana, and Raj was particularly compelling. They explained in detailed technical terms how their security systems actually worked, why the supposed attack was impossible given their protections, and how Karen's sabotage had been designed to create false evidence of system failures. She understood our systems well enough to make her sabotage appear convincing, Marcus testified, but she didn't understand them well enough to avoid leaving traces of her administrative actions. The same attention to detail that made her sabotage effective ultimately exposed her deception. Public opinion gradually shifted as the full story emerged. Karen, who had briefly been celebrated as a courageous whistleblower, was now seen as a dangerous saboteur who had put client data at risk and caused significant market disruption purely out of personal resentment. The jury deliberated for less than 2 days before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. Karen was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison, with additional financial penalties designed to compensate Meridian Financial for the costs of the crisis response and market losses. Judge Patricia Williams, who presided over the case, delivered a scathing assessment during sentencing. The defendant's actions went far beyond personal grievance or workplace dispute. She deliberately undermined public trust in financial institutions and caused widespread anxiety among innocent clients. Her sophisticated deception demonstrates a level of premeditation that demands serious consequences. In the months following the trial, Meridian Financial worked to rebuild its reputation and restore client confidence. The company implemented additional internal security measures designed to prevent similar sabotage attempts, while also creating new channels for employees to voice concerns about system security without resorting to deception. Marcus, Diana, and Raj received public recognition for their role in exposing the deception. They were invited to speak at cybersecurity conferences, where their experience became a case study in detecting and investigating internal threats. The National Cybersecurity Alliance presented them with awards for their professional integrity and technical expertise. This experience taught us that the most dangerous attacks often come from people who know your systems intimately, Diana said during her acceptance speech. It's not enough to protect against external threats. We have to design our security with the understanding that insider threats can be just as sophisticated and much more damaging. The case also prompted broader discussions within the cybersecurity community about the psychological factors that drive insider threats. Karen's actions were studied not just as a technical challenge, but as a human resources and management issue. Companies began implementing better systems for addressing employee grievances and ensuring that workplace disputes didn't escalate to sabotage. Raj reflected on the personal impact during an interview 6 months after the trial. The hardest part wasn't the technical challenge of solving the case. It was dealing with the public suspicion and professional doubt. For weeks, people questioned everything we had built, everything we stood for professionally. Clearing our names was important, but rebuilding trust took much longer. The 3 team members remained at Meridian Financial, where they continued to develop and refine the company's cybersecurity systems. Their experience with internal sabotage led to innovations in insider threat detection and response protocols that were eventually adopted throughout the financial services industry. 2 years after the incident, Meridian Financial was recognized by industry analysts as having one of the most robust and comprehensive cybersecurity programs in the financial sector. The company's stock price had not only recovered, but reached new highs as investors gained confidence in the institution's security measures and crisis management capabilities. Marcus was promoted to Chief Information Security Officer, a new position created to recognize the critical importance of cybersecurity in the company's operations. Diana became the lead architect for the company's next-generation security systems, while Raj was named Director of Threat Analysis and Response. The false crisis that Karen had created, intended to destroy their careers and discredit their work, had ultimately strengthened their professional positions and advanced their careers. But more importantly, it had demonstrated the resilience of properly designed security systems and the value of methodical, evidence-based investigation. In a final irony, the logging and monitoring systems that Karen had tried to manipulate became the foundation for new industry standards in insider threat detection. The techniques that Marcus, Diana, and Raj developed to expose her deception were incorporated into federal guidelines for investigating cybersecurity incidents. As the sun set over the city skyline, visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 42nd floor, the 3 colleagues reflected on their journey from suspects to heroes. The server room where they had first detected the anomalies hummed quietly with the sound of protected data and secured transactions. The red emergency lights had long since been replaced with the steady green glow of systems operating normally. Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if we hadn't been so thorough with our logging systems, Diana mused, reviewing security reports at her desk. We'd probably still be fighting to clear our names, Marcus replied. The lesson is that good security isn't just about preventing attacks. It's about being able to prove what actually happened when attacks occur. Raj looked up from his network monitoring console. Karen taught us something valuable, even if she didn't intend to. The most dangerous enemies are often the ones who know us best. But if we design our systems correctly, that same knowledge can become the evidence that exposes them. The story of Meridian Financial's false crisis became a cautionary tale taught in business schools and cybersecurity programs across the country. It demonstrated how personal grievances could escalate into sophisticated attacks on institutional integrity, but also how proper investigation and evidence-based analysis could reveal the truth, even in the most complex deceptions. Karen Hendricks remained in federal prison, her appeals exhausted and her reputation permanently destroyed. The woman who had once been considered a loyal, experienced employee was now a case study in how workplace resentment could transform ordinary people into dangerous saboteurs. But for Marcus, Diana, and Raj, the ordeal had ultimately strengthened their commitment to their profession and their understanding of the challenges they faced. They had learned that cybersecurity was not just about protecting against external threats, but about maintaining the integrity of the systems and institutions that society depended upon. The emergency sirens that had once wailed through the halls of Meridian Financial were now silent. In their place was something more valuable: the quiet confidence that comes from knowing that truth, properly investigated and carefully documented, would always prevail over deception. The crisis that was meant to destroy them had instead proven the strength of their systems, the value of their expertise, and the power of methodical, evidence-based investigation. In the end, justice had been served, and the financial institution stood stronger than ever, protected by systems that had been tested by fire and proven worthy of the trust placed in them by millions of clients around the world.